all of the G'day guys, it's Zach. Today we're going to be talking about part 2 of my Y62 build, and that's about how far you can take it in relation to performance, I guess. Obviously aesthetically there's a lot more you can do to these cars, there's more touring gear and all that sort of stuff you can put in, but I think I'm at the limit of performance, or how far you'd want to go on a stock car at least. Basically we're going to talk about a couple of things. So since the last video I've done quite a bit of stuff on the car. I've done PPF wrap by the girls at Slick As, which is absolutely amazing stuff when it comes to paint protection. I've actually put a new bull bar on because the Rhino bar got a little bit damaged once, and then I was too scared of it breaking again, so I hit a kangaroo and it kind of demolished the whole front of my car and did quite an extensive amount of damage, which I got fixed under insurance. It was basically a couple of headlights, the whole bar, a grille, did quite a bit of damage. So I've replaced the Rhino bar with the Razzler, which is a lot stronger. It's 3 pieces instead of about 15, and it's just a much stronger, better held together unit, I guess. So a couple of things I've done to sort of push the envelope of performance, I guess, is we went with the smaller pulley. We went down to a 75mm pulley and retuned the car. It went from about 330 kilowatt up to 406 kilowatt, which is scary, I guess. It's a lot of power to be pushing through, you know, a 3.5 ton car with a stock motor. We're basically maxed out in the MAF. The ECU is basically maxed out. We can't make any more power. We need more airflow, all sorts of other stuff. So we've kind of hit the limit with that. And the other thing I've done is in an effort to chase the wobbles through the book at my suspension system. So not only has it got like the East Coast Customs spring lift in it, I've replaced the rear springs with a full airbag setup, just to get a bit more consistent and a different spring rate. And I've actually added a shock to every corner of the car. So it's now got 8 shocks in there. So it's got the factory HBMC shocks, as well as an aftermarket shock. Me and a good mate of mine, Paul, we sort of butted heads on it, and we raided his workshop for as many bits and pieces as we could, and we've made up 4 shocks for the car. In the front, it's a Fox 2.0 with a pretty big reservoir on it, just to allow for a bit of extra cooling. And then in the rear, it's a 2.0 as well, with a little bit smaller res, and all custom valve, custom lengths. With the extra shocks, they work really well. They're all custom brackets, custom shocks. They're all valved to suit the way I like to drive, which is I like a nice firm ride. I like to be able to drive over bumps fast. I don't like slowing down for stuff. So I've basically custom valved all the shocks to suit me. So when it comes to suspension, a spring will hold the car off the ground. A shock is what controls the ride. With these cars being the hydraulic body motion control, the factory shocks are very limited. They're set up for a factory weight, factory unsprung weight, so factory tyres. They're set up perfectly for that. As soon as we go putting bigger tyres on it, different spring rates, more weight in the back, more weight on the front, the ride gets negatively affected, and it gets very plush, and in my eyes too plush for me. So for me, I added the extra shocks just to firm it up nicely and get the car back under control again, and it's worked really well. Obviously that's I guess the limit of how far you can go with HBMC still in the car. Yeah, you can pull it out and put sway bars back in if you're a dinosaur. Still having no sway bars, get the shocks in there to keep the weight under control. I've also made my own upper control arm for the front. So it's basically a billet upper control arm. So I basically drew that up in CAD, got the guys down at Best Engineering to buzz it out for me. We've used adjustable rod ends in it and the factory ball joint. And it's sort of allowed me to get like 4.5 degrees of caster in the front end, which is really good for these. It brings that steering back to something that is a little bit firmer, it's less twitchy. That in conjunction with the shocks, this thing is back to, you know, being on rails again. So, which is good for a car with 35-inch tyres and a bit of a lift kit in it, and, you know, 3.5 tonne of weight rolling down the road. So all in all, pretty happy with that. So engine performance, we're pretty much on the limit, and suspension performance, we're on the limit as well. There is obviously a lot more you can do if you go into, you know, chopping it into a ute and doing chassis extensions and all of the touring sort of stuff. But from a performance perspective for a wagon, this is about the limit you would go keeping it as stock as possible. So obviously you can, the next step after this would be a built motor and an aftermarket ECU and some more boost. As far as suspension, the next option is basically custom fabricated arms. You'd probably go like a coilover and a bypass or something like that. A little bit more travel. The world is endless once you get past, I guess, this, and it all depends how much money you want to throw at it, I guess. A couple other things I've done. I did mention the PPF, but I want to mention it again because it's freaking great. Like it's just completely, like you can scratch it up, you can grab sand and put sand in it, and it just doesn't scratch the paint. It might scratch the PPF itself, bit of sunlight or a bit of hairdryer on there, and it sort of takes the scratches out of it. It's a good way to sort of keep your car shiny, keep the paint well looked after. I've had this out bush several times. You get pinstriped, and within a day there's no pinstripes in it, there's no scratches. It's literally back to being shiny. You know, you can see by my sliders, I'm not exactly easy on the gear when I take it in the bush, but you know, the underside of the car looks terrible, but the top side of the car, no scratches, still looks great, still looks like a nice showy kind of vehicle. PPF is definitely a must-have if you're basically doing up any kind of four-wheel drive in Australia and you want to care about your paint job. Hit up the girls at Slick As and they'll sort you out. Or come to East Coast and we'll get it sorted out. So the other thing I've done is I've ditched all of my wood grain. It was getting harder and harder to look at the more I drove my car. So I got the guys at Wolf Smash Repairs I pulled all the wood grain out and I took it down to them and I said, look, free rein, make it look cool, let's put some airbrushing on there, give it a really cool sort of paint textured finish, and this is sort of what they've come up with. So it's a multi sort of layered paint job, and then a little bit of airbrushing they did on the center console with the little samurai head in there. So a good little touch for I guess a one-off interior, something custom, something that suits me. I think it's good, one of a kind. So if you've got any idea of what you want to do with the interior of your car, as in like get rid of the wood grain, we can get custom stitching done. Like the other really cool thing I've done is I have replaced the rear coils with a complete airbag. So again, me and Paul butted heads on it, and we've come up with a kit where we can put a complete airbag in and gotten rid of coils altogether. Now the reason I did that is because being an independent rear end, they're very much allergic to weight. So any kind of 100 kilos here, 200 kilos there, empty tank to full tank, I'm like 220 kilos of fuel in this thing from full to empty. When it comes to that, any ride height difference will cause basically toe in and toe out. They've got a lot of bumps here from full bump to full droop. The best way I sort of control that was to have the same ride height regardless of the load, regardless of the fuel load, regardless of having a trailer on the back being loaded up to go camping. The rear end of this car always sits at the same height. So an airbag was a bit of a no-brainer really. I've got that kit in there. This is the R&D kit, so I'm still waiting on some, again, billet rear lower arms that I've drawn up. Once they're sort of back from the machine shop, we can work out, kit costings and all that sort of stuff, and basically get you in to get your rear ride height more consistent, I guess. So another thing that I've done when I did my full air ride, it was just airbags to start with, and then I put an IntelliRide system in, which is an air tank, air compressor, and the auto ride height control. So all that from Airbag Man. The other thing I did while I was doing that is I put a dual ARB compressor in. So the reason I went, obviously different compressors, is the compressor for the air ride is basically humidity control. It does high pressures really well, but it doesn't do high volumes. Basically, I had to get another compressor to do my wheels and tyres. Every other car I've had, I haven't bothered with onboard air. They're a lot more forgiving when it comes to air pressure. I've had live axle cars where it doesn't really matter what air pressure you've got. The 62s aren't that forgiving, so I had to do something so I could pump the tyres up as I'm leaving the beach or as I'm leaving, a four-wheel drive track. So I went with the dual ARB compressor in the back. Pumps up the tyres in like 10 minutes. It's really good. It's quicker than driving to the servo and waiting in line, put it that way. So that about wraps up everything that I've done performance-wise. In the next couple of weeks, there's some pretty exciting things happening. I'm getting a turbo kit and I'm putting that on, so I'm pulling the blower off, putting a turbo kit on. So watch this space to see the results that we get from that. And like anything, if you like what you see and you want your car to be, you know, as on the limit as this one, give the guys at East Coast a ring and book her in.